a couple weeks before ADCC, I was talking with just our students and guys about peaking and tapering and recovering to get ready for a tournament. Mark comes to jiu-jitsu after a strong cyclist background. Shared with me Cyclist Training Bible and the Power Meter. As you can tell, these books are too thick for me. No, but could you fill us in on just some information about peaking and tapering and that you've learned? You use these as great reference. You said these were great reference for people. Could you just share with us some things that you felt important?
Yeah, well, I think the background is a little bit different in that in cycling, you can directly measure the energy that you're putting out. Okay. And that's what the power meter is about, right? So you can, within the drivetrain of a bicycle, see how much energy your body is able to produce, and for how long. So like I'm just learning in jiu-jitsu, to conserve energy at times and to be explosive at other times, and there's an analogy there to cycling. So the idea is to target training so that you can put out the right amount of power for the right amount of time. Sometimes that's aerobic, and that's kind of steady state power, and sometimes that's anaerobic. You're not using oxygen, and sometimes it's like neuromuscular, like that instantaneous type of effort. So within cycling training, you need to start with your goal of what type of event you want to compete in, and where you start from. So I think there's some analogy there to jiu-jitsu. What's the type of competition? What are my strengths and weaknesses? That I need to address. And some of that might be technical. It's a lot more technical than cycling, but some of it might be physical. I get gassed at the 5-minute mark, or I'm not strong enough to do this escape against a similar size opponent, something like that. As far as peaking and your kind of annual calendar, the cycling season, typically in summer for road cycling, there's events that focus on the winter, but typically most people are training for the summertime. Okay. So that means starting in the winter with that aerobic base training and looking to peak at a certain time. So your training progresses from generally highly aerobic with some anaerobic or sweet spot, which is kind of in between the two, training. And as you get closer to your goal event, your training should look more like the competition itself, right? As far as peaking, basically the concept of tapering is I'm resting such that my body can absorb the training and be at maximum fitness on the day of my goal event. And so
that's a really good word, a good term, absorb the training. Could you explain that a little bit?
Well, right now we just got done rolling. I'm tired,
Yeah.
So I've done work, but my body hasn't absorbed this yet. It's going to be 2 weeks, right, before
you've completely
adapted
or adapted. Adapted is good.
So, and that's different depending on the energy systems you're using in your body, right? So, like if I go out for a run and I'm running at an aerobic pace, heart rate's like below 150 kind of situation, that takes a certain amount of time to respond, your body to absorb that. And if we do like a really hard roll and you're going 100%, you're more anaerobic. That also takes time for your body to absorb, right? So,
let's say somebody's training every day and they have a big event coming up, and how do you know how much time it takes to absorb a certain? Yeah, how do you tell that?
Yeah,
for it to absorb and for your body to adapt.
Yeah, there's rules of thumb in here for cycling, based again on the energy system, right? And some of that's just biology, and but a lot of that is just personal, right? And so it's the kind of thing that keeping a journal or a training diary really makes sense.
Yeah.
So you can say, okay, well, I did, say before my, like the state championship was one that like I always trained for, right?
Okay.
So last year at the state championship, I stopped doing, really hard interval, high intensity efforts, 7 days out.
Okay.
And then the week of, I did, maybe like 5 to 7 hours of training, and it was really light, and it was maybe some focused sprint work or something like that, that didn't really tire me out too much, right?
Yeah.
I got lots of rest, things like that, so that I can then compare, especially if I'm able to directly measure the result, and that's with the power meter, and see, okay, I hit personal best numbers, during the event.
Does it talk about perceived stress at all? Like how, in measuring, using that as a measurement?
Oh, definitely. So, if the power meters are expensive, all the gadgets are expensive, right?
Because I've tried wearing a heart rate monitor and rolling, or training, I guess, and it just gets in the way. It doesn't seem to work. I can't figure out what you should do for jiu-jitsu. But,
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. Yeah. So, your question. Perceived exertion.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's actually like the old way of doing it. Before you had a power meter, you went on perceived exertion. There's a couple other measurements. Heart rate and perceived exertion are pretty parallel, although heart rate lags, right? Like, so if I take off at a sprint, my heart rate doesn't come up to, for a couple seconds, right? 10 seconds maybe. So that can kind of be, it's not a total kind of encapsulating metric. Blood lactate is an indicator of when you've gone from aerobic to anaerobic, which is really pertinent for cycling, right? Because if you could burn oxygen and fat for 5 hours and you still have some sugar in your muscles, then when it comes time, the business end of the bicycle race, you still have that sprint in your legs, if you will.
Right.
And I'm sure there's an analog here in jiu-jitsu in that, if you're not under stress and you're not maxed out during your match, and it comes to that, especially in a longer format maybe, at the 10-minute mark, because you can only go anaerobically for 5 to 8 minutes, right? And then you're cooked. You're back, right?
Yeah.
So, at least from my experience with cycling and what I've read, I would assume it's the same energy systems. You're going to be seeing that in jiu-jitsu. So, if you could be at your base kind of aerobic pace or conserving because of your technique, then come 10 minutes, you still have that explosive power. You still have something in the tank.
Right. Okay. That's good information. For somebody who's new, so how do you judge, what would be considered tapering and what wouldn't be considered tapering? And again, you said it's kind of up to the individual, but let's say you had a really hard, 2 or 3 weeks, and you're 2 weeks out. Is it okay to take a couple days off in those 2 weeks, and then is it bad to take a couple days off and then kind of rest a little bit and then start to climb back up in preparation for the tournament? Or is it always a good thing to wait to rest until the very last week, and then rest, and then the tournament comes and you go, you're ready to go then? How do you measure that? Or how do you decide that, I guess?
Yeah, so I think, for me, my experience was that I needed a good solid week. I started racing mid to late 20s, so not super young, anything like that. But I found a solid week, followed by lots of rest, but kind of like a preparatory workout, the day before. So like it was actually kind of a hard workout,
Okay.
like 45 minutes with sprints to kind of wake my body up from the rest.
From the kind of dormant state.
Yeah. I wasn't like a couch potato that week, but if you're training like 10 to 15 hours a week and you go down to 5 and it's kind of a relaxed 5, it's going to feel that.
Yeah, how do you deal with that? So mentally, maybe you don't feel like you're doing enough in that, you know?
Yeah.
You go from 10 to 15 and you drop it down to 5.
Yeah.
How do you maintain your focus and clarity when your workload is maybe half or even less?
It's hard, and especially like cycling. I'm heavier now, but like you got to haul all that up the hill, at race pace. So it matters if you're light. Just like in jiu-jitsu, you might not make weight or something like that. So there's mental games that you got to play. You're eating and you're like, oh, I'm gonna get fat. I'm gonna be too heavy for race day, or I'm gonna be too heavy for competition day. So I think the first thing is you have a plan for your training, at least in cycling, such that this is my goal event, and this is the 6 months, the 8 months, the 10 months.
This is how much time I have.
Right.
Yeah.
So that rest period is planned into the calendar. It's not like it's like
time to take a break.
Right.
Yeah.
Now maybe there are times like that. You get an injury, like my heart rate is super elevated in the mornings, and so I realize, okay, I'm not recovering, I'm not getting enough sleep, kids are waking up, whatever it is. But you have that plan, and I think that's the first part to being mentally prepared for that down week, is to have it planned, and then you know it's coming, and after you've done it once or twice, then you know, okay, this is part of the work to prepare myself for that day.
Right.
And that's what I have to tell myself, is like, and that's true just in life in general, like this part right here that sucks that I don't like, this is the work, right? This is why other people don't accomplish this, or this is why other people are not successful, because they're not willing to do this right now. And maybe that's different for me than for you in some instance, but that's what it comes down to, right? Are you willing to do what you are supposed to do?
Sure. Awesome. Maybe we can follow up with like a more practical jiu-jitsu one in the future.
After I learn some more jiu-jitsu from you.
We're gonna get you competing, doing some tournaments maybe. This is great information. Anything else that is good, maybe that you want to share or add into it?
I'm interested in working with you to like try to measure things more in jiu-jitsu.
Me too.
So like I know you mentioned like the heart rate monitor strap on the chest gets in the way. They've got wrist ones now. They've got other ones. So I think we should look into that, and maybe cut this part.
Let's do it.
But
no.
Yeah, let's because I looked at some of the literature online in like sports physiology journals and stuff like that, and there isn't a lot of stuff on measuring like energy output in jiu-jitsu because it is so hard to measure. It's technique specific, it's weight specific and things like that. And it's not like you're pushing on a bicycle, which is static.
Gives you all the data.
Yeah. It's like if you're lifting weights, there's this bar that is static in the action, and you can measure off of that, right? With the bicycle is the constant, and so I can measure off of what I'm doing to it. The other person is dynamic in jiu-jitsu. Sometimes I feel like I'm not dynamic, but that's the force that they're applying, where they're applying it, all that. So
I think, so when I was at Stanford University for some work, we were touring their sports and athletics facilities and trainers, and talking to the wrestling program and their trainers. They use the perceived stress test, which again, like, is you think of which is maybe the best form right now that's available, but you think of an institution like Stanford University, and it's almost like going back into the it's archaic.
Yeah.
Right.
60 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
it's they're using the perceived stress test, and they're using it effectively to change and optimize their athletes' performances. But yeah, I would have assumed that something higher level, more something more by the numbers.
Yeah, more technical. Something more
would be
modern.
implemented. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so let's follow up with something that we more science that we do in the future. That'd be
Cool.
fun. Thanks, Mark. Appreciate
Oh,
it.
thank you.